Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Truth Seeking Thursday here with Jay Young. And we are going to be covering the topic of, is there such a thing as the greater good tonight? And this is going to be a fun one because this is commonly an argument that I believe is used all over the place. I know I've heard it growing up. When we get into pop culture,
I've heard it.
Looking at Star Trek, I know that the phrase was uttered by Spock that the needs of the many outweigh the few, and as his duty to sacrifice himself for the many in either one of the movies. I think it was from The Wrath of Khan. But
I think that's right.
But so yeah, that's the topic we're going to be discussing tonight, and got a bunch of references here to throw at you guys so that you can check it out. I'm doing some stuff in the background here, so. Jay, what's been going on, man? How have you been?
Well, it's good. Working a lot on the blog. So I apologize. I don't have a finished product for you, but I hope to get it rolled out in the next couple of months. Looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward just to being a resource for people to have in terms of learning more about Bitcoin and kind of making it people's one-stop shop. I realize that, this is very much a nascent asset, very, very new. It is, in my opinion, the first true form of money we've ever had, and not enough people know about it. And I've tried to boil down, distill a lot of the basic questions that I get over and over and over again, which they're always good questions. They're legit questions, and I want to address them. Try to do it in such a way that it's repeatable, it's a force multiplier, and do it in a way that people can consume it at their own pace. And also, I'm not trying to monopolize the eyeballs. I'm trying to do this in such a way that I can actually refer readers to other content creators. I think it's so smart. It's so important that people understand there are other content creators out there, and that it's not just about me. It's about trying to service the widest number of people as possible. Maybe that's the common good. Maybe that's the greater good, right?
Well, getting the message out to people is important, and that's the whole thing, is to attempt to get people to be aware of this information and get it out to as many people as possible. And well, we're going to dive into it tonight because it sounds good. The greater good sounds good, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do the best for everyone around us, and it has like kind of a nice sounding appeal to it, right?
There's an altruistic quality to it that I think that appeals to many people.
Right. So I guess we should start off by defining it, and let me pull up the old definition here of the greater good, and see if that's popping up here. So it's from the Cambridge Dictionary. Help for most people in a society, especially if it involves harming one person or group, or doing something that could be considered morally wrong. So yeah, that's the definition there according to the Cambridge Dictionary.
So here's a question for you from that. So I see in the sentences they're using it as an example, but they don't really define it. Is this constituted the same as utilitarianism?
I believe it is like the whole thing behind utilitarianism, which is like you have to sacrifice, the individual needs to sacrifice for the collective, basically. I believe.
I think that's right, and I'll even go so far as to say, what one could interpret in terms of utilitarianism or the greater good. On the one end, there's the active side of it, like you said, which I think is that is a correct representation. The way you defined it is there's the active side of it, of actively sacrificing one or the minority for the majority. Then there's the other side of it is, well, we just don't actively enforce or respect individual liberty. There's no such thing as individual rights, and that's just not a part of the thinking. And so, at any point, the rights of the individual don't have to be thought of, and therefore, a society, a group, doesn't have to expend effort in order to protect the rights of the individual. So those, I think, are kind of the two extremes on that spectrum, if you will.
But Jay, I mean, isn't what's good for the collective good for the individual as well? Shouldn't the individual thrive in having to do what's best for everyone else?
Possibly. So we could take a look at historical examples on this. So let's take a look at the Helot class of Sparta in ancient Greece, the Helotage, and this was the slave class in ancient Sparta. Even though, contrary to what is popularly professed in movies such as 300, the Spartans didn't actually agree with the idea of individual rights or individual liberty for every person. It was just for the Spartans. And they had an entire slave class called the Helots that they used to essentially take care of all the grunt work in Sparta. The same thing for Rome. Fast forward about 3 or 4 centuries, and there was a well-established slave class within Rome. Again, they took care of a lot of the grunt work in there. And we heard about phrases such as "you're sent to the salt mines." That's actually something that did happen in Rome. And the Roman citizens would use the, and I know you're being sarcastic, but they would use that justification that you said, right? Well, we have to have a few to benefit the many. So some people had to be sacrificed for the greater good, especially for the greater Rome or the greater Sparta.
Well, Jay, looking into this today and doing some background into all this, this is a very ancient idea.
Yeah,
actually, and the origins of this you can see in sacrifices made so that it would appease Moloch. And the idea was that if we made these sacrifices, that it would bring back fertility, it would bring the rains, it would kind of an alchemical idea where you have to like give up like something that is very precious to you in order to receive blessings. And in a world of chaos that was early humanity, which was a ton of struggle and death and non-predictable weather patterns, things like that, where they couldn't schedule out their weather. They didn't have like the ability to make forecasting at that point in time and things like that. So it was very much life was an extreme survival, and this idea and concept popped up out of the need to find a way to bring order to all that chaos.
Yeah.
And so I found a really good video on this that I wanted to share. Kind of open this up, and we'll continue the discussion. But this is a really great little snippet to kind of get across the point here on the origins of this idea. Kind of very ancient in our humanity, and this is where it comes from. So this is part of a broader video, and this clip is coming from the Grand Theft World podcast through the Clip Genie, via Clip Genie, and searching for the term the greater good. And they played a snippet of a longer video, which is really good to go watch the full thing. And I'll make sure that that's in the reference notes for this live stream. But let me play this for a minute.
Cruelty comes in. The crowd doesn't see itself as cruel. It sees itself as responsible. Civilizations learn to dress horror in ritual. Drums drown the screams. Priests bless the act. And over time, the line between violence and virtue disappears. The phrase greater good becomes a shield. One child dies so that many may live. And once you accept that equation, you can justify anything. This isn't unique to Moloch. The Aztecs believed that the sun would die without hearts torn from living bodies. In India, during the Kali cults, human offerings were meant to delay the cosmic end. In Europe, witch burnings were considered necessary to purify society. All of them are variations on the same psychological mechanism. Terror managed through sacrifice, cruelty reframed as virtue. Now add hierarchy to the mix. Once kings and priests control the ritual, the sacrifice becomes a tool of governance. Power is no longer maintained by force alone. It's ritualized obedience. The people participate in their own submission, and that is far more stable than raw fear. It's no coincidence that Moloch was worshipped through state-sanctioned rituals. When fear is institutionalized, it becomes sacred. And sacred violence is the most enduring kind. Even today, this logic survives, just masked. We no longer call it sacrifice, but we still let systems harm the weak for economic stability, national interest, or greater efficiency. The names change, the altars modernize, but the fire never really goes out, because once a civilization learns to feed it, it doesn't forget how. You'd think we left all that behind. That burning children in the arms of a god was a horror buried in ancient ruins, not something that echoes in the heartbeat of our modern world. But we didn't bury the ritual, we evolved it. Today, we no longer build statues to Moloch. We build systems, and systems too demand sacrifices. Modern society may not light literal fires, but it burns people just the same. Look at how our world is structured. Wars that chew through generations, economies that collapse entire classes, industries that knowingly destroy lives for profit. And somehow we call it progress. But behind the sanitized language, national interest, quarterly targets, acceptable losses, there's an old rhythm playing. The same rhythm that pounded in the temples of Moloch. We've replaced bronze idols with boardroom tables, but the ritual logic remains. Ritual sacrifice has become metaphorical, but not less real. Today, we sacrifice time, health, ethics, even childhood itself, not to gods, but to institutions. A family working 80-hour weeks to survive is a sacrifice. A child laboring in a sweatshop to keep the supply chain moving is a sacrifice. A young soldier sent to a senseless war, his innocence burned away in the name of strategy. That too is sacrifice. The fire is symbolic now, but the cost is still human. These systems don't just allow for suffering, they require it. They feed on it. Because without sacrifice, there's no control mechanism, no hierarchy, no greater good to justify the machinery. Like MOLOCH, these systems thrive only when people agree, consciously or not, that pain can be productive, that someone has to suffer to keep the world running. Nowhere is this clearer than in public spectacle. From political inaugurations to corporate launches, from award shows to secretive elite gatherings, the choreography is eerily familiar. Symbols, staging, the crowd, the mask of unity. What is the Super Bowl halftime show, if not ritual theater? What are Davos and Bilderberg, if not altars of influence? The language may be modern, but the subconscious is ancient. And sometimes, the resemblance is less metaphorical than we'd like to believe. Take the infamous gathering at Bohemian Grove, a giant stone owl presiding over a mock sacrifice called the Cremation of Care. The attendees, US presidents, CEOs, military strategists, the most powerful men on earth. They call it art, tradition, satire. But it's worth asking, why invoke ancient rites at all? Why echo the structure of blood rituals unless there's something in the pattern that still speaks to power? Maybe it's not accidental. Maybe it's homage. Or maybe, at that level of influence, they're not just reenacting history, they're continuing it. This is how ritual evolves. It doesn't die, it adapts. It moves from temple fires to contracts, from high priests to fund managers, from gods who demand sacrifice to systems that simply expect it. And just like before, no one questions it, because it's hidden in plain sight. Because the drums are louder now. Moloch did not die in the flames of the ancient world. He migrated into language, into thought, into the scaffolding of civilization itself. And in the 20th century, it was not a priest or a ruler who named him again, but a poet. Allen Ginsberg was not a theologian. He wasn't a prophet, at least not in the traditional sense. He was the son of a school teacher and a mentally ill mother. He lived in a world that punished difference, institutionalized sensitivity, and suffocated spirituality. In Howl, a poem that reads like both a breakdown and a revelation, he screams the name of a god most of the modern world had forgotten, Moloch. But this wasn't the Moloch of bronze and smoke. This was something colder. Moloch.
Like and subscribe.
All right. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of the principles. So while I don't have the theistic bent, or I'll say the theistic justification, I think a lot of the principles, the underlying principles are sound, right? And one thing I wanted to bring up is, and I know it's going to sound like an extreme example, but I think there are parallel themes here, is Hellraiser. If you know the movie series Hellraiser.
Yeah, it scared the crap out of me when I saw it when I was younger. My brother was into horror movies, and I watched it with him. And
if we think about it, that is the ultimate horror movie, right? The ultimate horror theme is being sent to hell, and then it's really well documented, right? Publicized, and the idea is it is eternal, that a body can be broken down through eternal suffering, right? And then brought back to life for additional suffering. And obviously the first three movies I thought were really good, and then the reboot was good. But the book, The Hellbound Heart, which was the book that Hellraiser was based on, goes in a lot more detail. And Clive Barker did such a good job of creating abstractions and very vague descriptions of how torture happened. And between the books and the movies, there were actually graphic novels that came out of this. So entire lore came out of this. And what was interesting is that there were basically entire religious sects that came out of worshiping their version of Satan, which was Leviathan. And in the way that the Cenobites, the hell priests, worshipped Leviathan is through their suffering, right? It wasn't suffering because it was to achieve a task. It was the suffering was the end goal. And what the narrator was talking about, in a way, that's kind of that was it. It's the suffering that brings about the good part, the so-called common good, as compared to people who they work hard and maybe they are in physical pain, but the pain is not the purpose. The purpose is rational, logical thought implemented through hard work, like the Puritans, right, or the Amish. So they may be exhausted, they may be hurting, they're down to the bones, but it's not the pain that's the end goal. It's working hard collectively. I say collectively as a group of well-intentioned people, and I think so much of what the narrator talked about, and I think it was an accurate description, especially in terms of Moloch, is no, it's the suffering that's the point. The suffering is the means by which we achieve certain things, and that reminds me so much of Hellraiser and the lore that came out of Hellraiser.
Well, I think it's basically once you say that something is for the greater good of society, then you start to be able to rationalize all kinds of ways that you can stomp on the individual. And truly, it's only from individuals taking their actions towards their benefit that it overall benefits the wider society. And so this idea, it's really like a systems thinking. And with early humanity, it was kind of set in place that we're not really able to like rationalize all these things that are happening in nature, and the world seems very chaotic. So how do we make some kind of order come out of all this chaos? And it was, by sacrificing children that was the ultimate sacrifice in this thought of like being able to bring about order to the chaotic world. And I mean, if we look at today, I recently had on Alan Booker. We did a recorded episode interview, and Alan had been a systems engineer with telecom communication infrastructure for years, and went down the path toward permaculture as he was still working in the career of telecoms. And he was explaining it to me is that that really stuck with me was that he said, whatever you incentivize, you're going to get more of. So when, like the narrator talked about in that segment there, was that with our corporations now, the incentive is to create more profit for the shareholders, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what happens to the people. There could be broad pollution, all these things that happen, and it can be justified because it's making more profits for the shareholders, but neglecting the human suffering that it is caused through those actions. So that idea of the greater good can kind of get mingled up into, the road to hell is being paved with good intentions kind of thinking.
Yeah. If I could take a slight detour on this, because I think you touched on a really good point, which is life was considered to be chaotic, right? And definitely at the whims of the gods, right? Whatever gods that people worshipped at the time. There was a great book called Against the Gods, and it's a takeoff of the title Against the Odds. And I think it's Jeremy Siegel, I could be wrong on that, which talked about the transition from assuming that what people experienced in quote unquote nature was purely the whim of the gods. And we hear a lot about this from the ancient Greek gods, right? Zeus and the courtier of the court, if you will, of other gods had battles with each other, and humans were kind of at the whim of suffering amongst those ancient Greek gods. And whether it be a storm or a blight or even wonderful bountiful rain, and like I think you were alluding to very accurately, is the whole idea that the gods could play with men in nature. And then the author showed that there were people throughout history who were able to provide pretty greater and greater accuracy in terms of statistics, and show how these were really just chance encounters, and that through that they were actually able to create fairly decent actuarial mathematical models, where they could hedge against some of these events. So, for example, the Lloyds of London and underwriters came about because of the ability to underwrite or fund some sort of shipping expedition from, let's say, England to North America, and based upon the expected rate of catastrophe was the expected rate of return of the shipment, they could actually generate a probability of profit. And so it's gone from there is zero there are zero rules to there are some rules and we can actually hedge against them. And it was a really cool historical look at that. And I just wanted to take a quick detour because I think it shows a difference in mentality, because I think what you said was very, very accurate in terms of the mentality at that time versus the mentality of today.
So let me bring up this other reference I have here, which comes from the Academy of Ideas, getting more into this idea of the greater good. And give me a minute here. Did I bring that up? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Got it queued up here. Have you heard of the Academy of Ideas?
I don't think so. I'm interested to hear about it.
Okay, so the title of this one is called How the Greater Good is Used as a Tool of Social Control.
Okay.
So get into it. And let me know when you want me to pause, because
the great citizens of a country are not those who bend the knee before authority, but rather those who, against authority if need be, are adamant as to the honor and freedom of that country. Instead of respect for reason, open dialogue, freedom of speech, and individual and property rights, political systems across the world are becoming increasingly authoritarian. Deceptions and lies, manipulation and propaganda, fear-mongering and psychological operations are all being used to justify political actions and policies that destroy life. How do politicians continue to convince the public to do away with their freedoms in favor of heavy-handed government control? Why are so few people defending liberty when a world absent of it is a world of mass suffering? In this video, we are going to examine these questions. If freedom is regressing today throughout such a large part of the world, wrote Albert Camus, this is probably because the devices for enslavement have never been so cynically chosen or so effective, but also because her real defenders, through fatigue, through despair, or through a false idea of strategy and efficiency, have turned away from her. It is often said that one cannot solve a problem if one is not even cognizant of it. And herein lies one of the reasons freedom is retreating so rapidly from our world. Many people still believe themselves to be free, and as Goethe wrote, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Those who believe themselves to be free disregard the fact that to be governed in the modern world is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censored, and commanded by beings who have neither the right, nor the wisdom, nor the virtue to do so. Accepting our lack of freedom is a necessary step to counteract this undesirable condition. For so long as we remain in denial of the chains of servitude that are upon us, we will do nothing to cast them aside. But when we acknowledge our chains, we can begin to push back against them and in the process contribute to the creation of a better world. Or as Camus noted, the task of men is not to desert historical struggles, nor to serve the cruel and inhuman elements in those struggles. It is rather to remain what they are, to help man against what is oppressing him, to favor freedom against the fatalities that close in upon it. Man's greatness lies in his decision to be greater than his condition. And if his condition is unjust, he has only one way of overcoming it, which is to be just himself. But widespread ignorance as to the lack of freedom is not the only reason why freedom is retreating from the world. Rather, there is also an idea that has infected many minds, and this idea, if not defeated, could prove to be the kiss of death for freedom in our generation. This idea is promoted by most politicians, indoctrinated into the youth at school and via popular culture, and championed by the vast majority of talking heads in the mainstream media. This idea is collectivism. To understand what collectivism is, we must consider the question: does the individual exist for the sake of society, or does society exist for the sake of individuals? Those who adhere to collectivism believe that the individual exists for the sake of society, and therefore that the individual has to subordinate himself to and conduct himself for the benefit of society, and to sacrifice his selfish private interests to the common good. This collectivist mindset is foundational to communism, fascism, and socialism. The common good before the individual good, proclaimed one of collectivism's most infamous adherents. The doctrine of collectivism has been put into practice by many dictators such as Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao. Death, destruction, and suffering on a mass scale was the end result in each case. How does placing the good of society above the good of the individual tend towards such unfortunate outcomes? Is it not a display of compassion to sacrifice our personal interests for the greater good of our society? At first glance, collectivism may seem to be a virtuous position to take, but on closer investigation, a philosophical error called the fallacy of misplaced concreteness corrupts the practical application of this ideology. The fallacy of misplaced concreteness occurs when one treats what is merely an abstraction as an entity that exists in the real world. Collectivism, in claiming the individual must sacrifice his or her private interests for the sake of society, takes what is merely a concept, society, and treats such a concept as if it had a concrete existence. But as Carl Jung points out, society is nothing more than a term, a concept for the symbiosis of a group of human beings. A concept is not a carrier of life. In contrast to the individual that has a real existence in the world, society is an abstraction used to represent an ever-changing collection of individuals living and interacting in proximity.
I wanted to pause it there because make a commentary on that, because that idea there of the concrete, the fallacy of concrete abstractness, and bring that up because that's pretty profound when I heard that, because it's like, yeah, society. What is society? Can you point to the thing that is society? You know, it's a collection of people, and it's an idea. So it's not a physical entity. And that was one of your questions that you prompted before we got going, is who implements the common good?
Yeah.
What particular entity would be more qualified than anyone else? So when we talk about society, who's going to make that decision?
Yeah.
It's going to come down to an individual or a group of individuals coming up with a decision of what's the best for society.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've talked a little bit before about the book Ominous Parallels. I think that was by Leonard Peikoff. He was a protege of Ayn Rand. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about Rand and the concept of altruism in a few minutes. But yeah, you know, that was something that's, you know, Peikoff was really talking about the parallels that he was seeing all the way back in the early 80s between Nazi Germany and the United States. And this was only 40 years after the end of World War II, already seeing parallels there. He was really concerned. And it was the whole idea, and I think it goes back to exactly what you're talking about, is this idea that there's a select few who can divine what the intent of this thing called society or the state is, right? It's a super organism. And, you know, it's really kind of scary if you think about it, because almost anyone can place themselves in this a pseudo hierarchy, if you will. And they can say, well, I understand, you know, I can hear what the super state is saying, what the super organization is saying, but you can't. You know, therefore I'm better qualified. I may not even be more intelligent. Obviously I am more intelligent, but I may not even be more intelligent, but I can hear what the state is saying and what it's intending, right? And therefore you need to listen to me. I mean, it's without trying to make the comedic connection here, it's almost like the difference between the Sith and the Jedi, right? The Jedi were there to listen to the will of the Force, right? And they were the only ones who were in tune. Now, granted, in the Star Wars universe, that was like legit, like there was something called, you know, the living force and the cosmic force. But you know, these individuals put themselves in this position of this pseudo hierarchy where only they were attuned to what the state, the super organism, was saying, you know, or the pseudo philosophy, if you will, of, you know, the common good, right? Whatever is the common good, whatever they say it is in the moment. And they can weave this elaborate tapestry, whatever they want it to be, and they can pull in qualifiers and exceptions, you know, for whatever the moment is, and really make it. They can get people spun around the axle, the proverbial axle, in trying to get some population to go in whatever way they want, whatever that is. You know, you need to, you know, let's take Cuba, right, in the 60s, right, and there was a glut of sugar in the market. What they do? They just made more sugar. Why? Because Castro told them to, you know. And you know, it's just little things like that they can move entire societies because of bad philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, and it's really that idea of centralization versus decentralization. Is one group or one individual going to be able to solve the complexities of all the interactions of goods and services and everything that needs to happen in order for things to function? Or is that going to come from free individuals making the decisions on the ground where they're at?
Yeah.
In order to come up with the best solution possible for their circumstances.
I think this was so I think you're touching on something really important here. And this was a pretty minor difference that Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises had. They were both of the Austrian School of Economics. and I can't remember which one took which position, but one of them took the position that government or the state is incapable of having all the necessary information to make pertinent economic decisions. And then the other one said, well, maybe they could, but even if they could, they don't have the processing power, right, to determine what's the correct course. But in either way, I think in a way they're both correct in the sense of they have neither the ability to obtain the information nor do they have the processing power. And I'm going to say there's even a third aspect. And I think this is kind of a lot of what you're leading up to is, do they have the value system to know what to prioritize, if you will? And I think that's a lot of what you've been leading up to very, very accurately is what is the proper stack ranking? You know, and I just don't think that there's any single entity or committee that can do that, right? Because we're all humans, we're all fallible. And you know, what you just mentioned a couple minutes ago is who's going to be better equipped and have better knowledge of what they need than the person, as you just said, the person, you know, on the ground where the rubber meets the road.
Right. Yeah. And when you're talking about people working together in like a tactical situation or something like that in the military or something, it's the guys with the boots on the ground that have to come up with those decisions on the fly. They can't, I mean, otherwise we would be strictly automatons, right? We would be like robots, just pushing in to just obey whatever orders come to us.
Yeah, we're all NPCs, non-player characters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think, you know, I like your analogy that you're bringing up there. I think I remember, I think it was Colin Powell during the first Gulf War talked about, you know, who's he going to trust if he has a general, maybe a theater commander who's telling him one thing, and then he's got let's say a battalion commander is telling him something else. Who's he going to trust? He's going to trust the commander, you know, at the battalion level because he's right there. He's either seen it himself or he has troops that are telling him directly. And that's the one he's going to go with. And I think that it's being closer to the situation where he's going to default, you know, barring any other exception, right? He's going to definitely tend towards that.
And I think this is we're getting into an era now where the AI comes into play because I think these folks think that if we can just take and collect all this data and then be able to order society with this AI, basically, because the AI is going to be able to do all these complex things, but therein, you know, thinking about how things work in nature, there are unforeseen events that you cannot plan for. And I think that they think that they can solve all the issues and get compliance out of the population enough so that they will behave like automatons in a way through the social engineering, using AI as a way to keep people in their little bubbles of reality.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it gets into two major areas that AI is going to struggle with for a long time. It's the concept of second and third order knock-on effects, right? Is not being able to anticipate how these one move will change things, you know, 2 or 3 layers away from that. So secondary, tertiary effects. And then this also gets into something within AI and also smart contracts for anyone who's interested in crypto. It's called the Oracle problem, and it's the inability for these systems to have sensory feedback from real life back into the system to give some sort of course correction, right? At a minimum, to say, okay, your prediction was wrong, right? And then here's what actually happened. And with current AIs, and this is no hit on current AI technology, right? But it's on a very interesting arc. But they have zero ability to receive feedback from reality, you know, and we always hear about these instances of someone's able to make an AI go off in these crazy, you know, tangents because there's no sense of epistemology. right? There's no ability to answer the question, how do I know what I know, right? They don't have that feedback loop. And this is what, separates humans, not just from AI, but the vast majority of animals out there, right? Is that our ability to have feedback and then create layers and layers of abstraction there. And I think that, kind of adding to what you're saying is these committees who are making these decisions, they're humans, right? They have their biases, they have their emotional, foibles, if you will. And so they won't be able to make proper analysis, and they don't have the ability to consume all the information necessary for that proper feedback loop. Yeah,
that was the whole thing that the conversation I got in with Alan is that these folks have a very mechanistic view of reality when reality doesn't behave in that way. Once the scientists started to realize what happens on the quantum scale does not behave the same as the macro scale.
Yeah.
That kind of throws a wrench in the whole operation there for having this like mechanical view of how reality works.
Yeah.
So there's unforeseen things that can happen that throw a wrench in the whole idea that you can create some type of order from on high.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. I think if we take a look at those people such as, we saw the four men standing shoulder to shoulder, right? It was Karl Marx,
Lenin,
Stalin, right, exactly. And I don't know, was Mao in there? I don't remember. But I think ultimately what they were going for, it was this whole Jungian deep dive of fear of lack of control. They had this obsession with control, if you will, whether it be their court that was around them or nation that they had wrapped around themselves. And this was very anti-Taoist, anti-Zen, right? And they just you could probably trace this back to childhood trauma. I hate to keep going to psychology of it, but I think it's critical, right? And you could probably trace a lot of trauma in their lives, and they never grew up, they never self-actualized, and then trying to impose their will onto others with these really evil philosophies. And speaking of evil philosophies, one thing they talked about in the video you're showing, which I really appreciate, is the concept of altruism. Ayn Rand, she was the founder of objectivism, the philosophy of objectivism, and she consistently rallied against altruism. And she said it's just one of the most evil and pernicious philosophies out there. And it really gets, it's almost right to the topic we're going in through here is of sacrifice, right? And whether it be I can sacrifice another, or a person just says, I'm going to sacrifice myself for the greater good. And I think this is a little bit different. I think you alluded to this well. A person in the military, right? They sacrifice themselves. They jump on the grenade and they save their buddies. Rand would not call that sacrifice. She wouldn't, and she had a very specific term or definition of sacrifice, which is basically external imposition on another. Versus the Marine who jumps on the grenade for his brothers, he does it out of love, and he's meaning his highest ideal is to protect his brothers. So that she wouldn't call that sacrifice, and she wouldn't call that altruism either. And it kind of gets back to the whole idea of suffering for the sake of suffering. The only way we can advance is creating suffering. Right. And, and I recommend anyone to look into do a search on Ayn Rand and altruism. And someone else could probably do a much better job than I could in describing why altruism is so nefarious.
Well, you have this modern pop thing of altruism pop up with not Sam Altman, but Sam Bankman-Fried or whatever was part of this whole idea of effective altruism.
Yeah, altruistic capitalism, is that what he called it?
I think it's called effective altruism.
Okay, sorry.
I'll bring it up here, but yeah, it's another one of those things where it's like, if we I can't remember, I think we talked about it in the past, but it's like, do I save this Picasso painting versus saving this child? Well, I would save the Picasso painting, because then I could sell it, and then I could save thousands of children from hunger or starvation or a war or something like that by selling the painting.
Right. Yeah.
And you can justify all kinds of things for that when it's truly against humanity.
Yeah.
So let me see. I'll bring that up, but let's dive a little further into that video here.
Okay.
So,
as far and as wide as one looks, one will never find a concrete entity called society that we can point to and identify in the manner analogous to how we can identify an individual. Society does not exist apart from the thoughts and actions of people. It does not have interests and does not aim at anything. The same is valid for all other collectives. Or as Carl Jung put it, the nation, like the state, is a personified concept. The nation has no life of its own apart from the individual and is therefore not an end in itself. All life is individual life, in which alone the ultimate meaning is to be found. As a society is a concept, it cannot think, act, speak, or choose, and therefore an individual or a group of individuals must be granted the ability to define the so-called societal greater good, and then granted the power to force individuals to act in service of this good. Since the dawn of civilization, it has been ruling classes who anoint themselves the arbiters of the greater good, and so not surprisingly the greater good, more often than not, merely amounts to the good of those in power. Or as the 20th century psychologist Nathaniel Branden wrote, with such collectivist systems, the individual has always been a victim, twisted against him or herself and commanded to be unselfish, in sacrificial service to some allegedly higher value, called God or Pharaoh or Emperor or King or society or the state or the race or the proletariat or the cosmos. It is a strange paradox of our history that this doctrine, which tells us that we are to regard ourselves, in effect, as sacrificial animals, has been generally accepted as a doctrine representing benevolence and love for humankind. From the first individual who was sacrificed on an altar for the good of the tribe, to the heretics and dissenters burned at the stake for the good of the populace or the glory of God, to the millions exterminated in slave labor camps for the good of the race or of the proletariat. It is this collectivist morality that has served as justification for every dictatorship and every atrocity, past or present. The philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a staunch collectivist who exerted a profound influence on the ideas of Karl Marx.
We'll pause it there for a second and bring up the logical fallacy of reification, which is talking about what he mentioned there about when an abstract belief, or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity, when an idea is treated as if it had a real existence. So the idea of society being some kind of physical entity, being able to make decisions, when we're talking about sacrificing for the greater good. So,
if I could give a comedic version of this, if I were to say so-and-so, Bill has a magnetic personality, the person who takes that too literally They could say, oh, well, is it able to attract, iron? Is he able to attract iron to himself because he has a magnetic personality? That would be reification, right? Excessive abstract concreteness, if you will, right? And obviously that's the joke. Everyone would understand. That's just baloney. But it's sad that so many people have been fooled into this whole idea that society exists, that government exists. And many times I've gotten into very, very civil disagreements with people, and about the concept of what is the proper role of government, right? And then I ask people, okay, can you do me a favor? Can you touch government for me, please? Can you break off a piece of government? And they look at me like I've got two heads coming out of my shoulders. And I say, okay, does government actually exist? They'll say, well, yeah, of course it does. And they'll say, as an example, you can have a government vehicle, you can have a government building. Those are examples of government. I said, okay, fine. Give me a piece of government. Put some government in my hand. and that's when the gears start grinding. They start to realize, oh yeah. And without using these words, I've excessively made this excessively concrete. And I think that's so sad that that's where we've gotten to. But we use language like this so much. I mean, since we're little kids, right?
Yeah,
indoctrinated. And it's sad that we never give a second thought to these ideas that it is excessively concrete.
Yeah. It's all about growing up, getting a lot of these ideas implanted in our minds that we have to do what's best for society, and that be a good old citizen there, buddy.
Yeah.
Here we go. Tyler, who can determine what is good? Good from one individual or cultural perspective is often evil from another.
Yeah, very good point. Totally agree with that. Let's take a modern example of this, Tyler, because I think it's a great call out here. And I'm not siding with one side, and nor am I denigrating another side. All right. Let's take some of the major differences between East and West, and let's say Muslim and Christianity. Right. There are some pretty obvious differences there. Right. And one could say that whether it be religious differences or cultural differences, one side says one thing and another side says the exact opposite, concept, a completely different idea, and I think that we're seeing that basically since I'll go back to as far as the 70s, right? In terms of how some people viewed, I'm trying to be as delicate as I possibly can with this, the taking over of certain civilian flights, if you will. And one side says, oh, that's perfectly fine, that's justified. Another side says, no, that's not justified. And it is both, I think, a religious and cultural difference there. And I think Tyler's bringing up a really good point. And we could go through a whole bunch of things in society, right? How women are treated in some society versus another society. How children are treated in some societies versus other societies. We saw what happened in the ancient Roman times. The way children were treated was not good. It was pretty kind of disgusting, if you will. Things that we would think about now would just be, we would consider abhorrent behavior.
Yeah, and so I mean, we'll dive into the video further because it gets into this and how the individual must stay paramount, because you have the freedom to do and make those decisions and make the choices to your locality, which ends up being the most beneficial, as long as you're not inflicting harm on someone else.
Yeah.
So let's get into that a little more.
Promoted collectivism's negation of the individual with the following words: a single person, I need hardly say, is something subordinate. and as such he must dedicate himself to the ethical whole. Hence, if the state claims life, the individual must surrender it. All the worth which the human being possesses, he possesses only through the state. Contrary to the philosophical trickery promoted by collectivism, neither the greater good of society, nor the state, nor any other concept used to describe a symbiosis of human beings is superior to flesh and blood individuals, whose spontaneous actions are the real creative and generative force in the world. As the 19th century British philosopher Oberon Herbert wrote, "The individual is king, and all other things exist for the service of the king." Or as he further explained, "The individual is included in many wholes: his school, his college, his club, his profession, his town or county, his church, his political party, his nation. But he is always greater than them all. All these various wholes, without any exception, exist for the sake of the individual. They exist to do his service. They exist for his profit and use." The conviction that the individual is king informed the ideas of the Enlightenment thinkers of the 17th and 18th centuries, and led to a rapid awakening to the vital connection between freedom and the individual rights of life, liberty, and property. Generally speaking, individual rights specify that the only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way, so long as we do not attempt to deprive others of theirs or impede their efforts to obtain it. Each is the proper guardian of his own health, whether bodily or mental or spiritual. Those who support individual rights are not motivated by an insensitivity to the plight and suffering of others, but rather by the recognition that in granting each of us the freedom to pursue our own good, social cooperation, the division of labor, and a prosperous society emerge in a bottom-up manner, and thus the ability to help others also improves. For without the wealth-generating mechanism of freedom, all the good intentions in the world will not clothe, house, and feed the poor. Collectivists claim the opposite. An emphasis on the rights of the individual, they suggest, rather than on the greater good, tends to inhibit social cooperation and promote an atomized population in which every man and woman is an island left to fend for themselves. But here collectivists have it backwards. We are naturally social animals, and so the atomization of individuals only results when a government, under the guise of the greater good, is granted the power to enforce social isolation, or else to sow the seeds of fear and suspicion amongst friends and neighbors. In his classic study of 20th century collectivist political systems, the medical doctor Just Mirlu noted that, behind the Iron Curtain, the most prominent complaint in the totalitarian system was the feeling of mental isolation. The individual feels alone and continually on the alert. There is only mutual suspicion. Carl Jung, who lived through the totalitarianism which swept across mid-20th century Europe, likewise observed, "The mass state has no intention of promoting mutual understanding and the relationship of man to man. It strives for atomization, for the psychic isolation of the individual. The best way to promote social cooperation and a prosperous society is not through top-down centralized control, but to remove the clamps of control and to let individuals make their own choices with respect to their own lives. And this is what a society structured on individual rights accomplishes. Live and let live, as the age-old adage puts it, or as David Kelly explains. Individual rights leave individuals responsible for living their own lives and meeting their own needs, and they provide the freedom to carry out those responsibilities. Individuals are free to act on the basis of their own judgment, to pursue their own ends, and to use and dispose of the material resources they have acquired by their efforts. Those rights reflect the assumption that individuals are ends in themselves, who may not be used against their will for social purposes. As individual rights leave us free to pursue our own good in our own way so long as we do not aggress upon the person or property of others, it follows that each of us has the right to freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of association and assembly, the right to property and bodily autonomy, and the right to work and retain the fruits of our labor. Man is absolute lord of his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody. Individual rights are universal in that they apply to all human beings everywhere. Rights exist regardless of whether they are implemented in the legal constitution of a given country, and they are inalienable in that they cannot be given or taken away by any man, government, or institution. A man's natural rights are his own, against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man, calling himself a robber, or by millions, calling themselves a government. When a society and the judicial system are predicated on a deep respect for and commitment to individual rights, the individual is king, and therefore the individual is free. But when individual rights are transgressed under the pretext of public safety or the greater good, the individual turns into mere political property, which any mob or government or institution in power can oppress, detain.
I wanted to pause it there for a second because, this became a real issue during the whole lockdowns with COVID and everything like that. I remember having conversations with my coworkers about this is all, this is completely wrong what's going on, and this should not be followed and obeyed. And I was like, man, screw all this, man. Like, this is really dumb and we shouldn't be doing this. And it was like one of those things where it was brought up as like, you have to live in society. And I'm like, I don't want to live in a society that's like this, man.
Yeah.
And it brings me to this quote that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Yeah. So, when you're just going along to get along, that people that are just in this thing, just going along with whatever is being told to them, that you're considered normal, but people should have the courage to stand up and say, no, that, this is not right. That everything that's going on, we have to say something. We have to do something about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And this gets into the whole concept that I apologize for the mispronunciation. Alexander Solzhenitsyn talked about in the Gulag Archipelago. It was just the idea of the lie, right? He decided at a personal level, I'm not going to live by the lie, whether it be agreeing with a lie or professing a lie. He's not going to participate in it. And there's a very good friend of mine, Kirsten, who gave me this great line: "I'm not going to co-sign your bullshit." And I thought that was so good. Whether it be, again, actively co-signing someone's BS or passively co-signing someone's BS, just simply saying, "Oh yeah, sure, that's fine, that's okay." Even if we don't repeat the lie, just going along with it is a problem, right? Because that in and of itself creates its own snowball effect. And I think that's so important to defend against that. And what really concerns me is probably two different things. Is governments at a local level, and I used to live in Washington when a lot of this BS was going down, and I saw this firsthand where local governments, whether it be at the county or municipal level, were taking measures such as threatening to yank a business's business license if they stayed open, right? So some businesses were just saying, you know what, we're not going to comply. We're not going to shut down. If people want to come here, we're going to serve them food and drink. These are like bars and restaurants. We're going to continue to serve them. And what the cities and counties started doing is, well, we're just going to yank your license first. And if you continue to engage in business, then we'll have you arrested and we'll civilly sued for engaging in business without a business license. And this gets back to the whole concept of centralization, which I think a lot of us and people in the audience, we all appreciate the dangers of high levels of centralization, right? And so there's that aspect of it. And then there's the other aspect of, and this is kind of specific to the lockdowns, the concept of public health and what was considered to be the best practices of public health, which are established a little over a century ago in the earliest part of the 20th century. And if we had some sort of a breakout like what we had during the 2020 and 2024 era, the idea of locking down an entire population, that was completely antithetical to what's considered best practices for public health. The only people who would ever be locked down would be the people who actually tested positive for a particular pathogen, or they were at least symptomatic, right? And so this whole idea of so-called public health was completely thrown on its head. And I remember even seeing Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this, right, where he said, "Oh, well, you have an obligation, you have a civil contract, to be locked down." And this was written down, and it was one of those times it's like watching a sports event. I wish I could have talked to the referee in real quick.
Timeout.
Yeah, hold on, you're full of crap. That's bullshit, man. Show me where's the Lockean concept of social contract that you're referring to, because I've never heard of that before, right? And then I'm pretty sure, Dr. Tyson, you have no conception of public health, and you definitely did research the concept of best practices prior to this all coming around, before he started spewing his nonsense. So I think those two areas really they really kind of fed on each other, and it kind of goes back to a lot of what you're saying around just the concept of the lie. I will not participate in the lie.
Absolutely. And if you can, some people that I've recently met, this was a big awakening for them, was to see everything that played out. And before that, they were just going along with their lives and doing their normal life stuff. And then this comes about and it really shook them up, so that they're like, whoa, what is going on here? Something is not right.
Yeah.
And I think that was, a way that a lot of people are now looking into a lot of this information, and that it's important to dive deeper and to do this research on your own, so that you are not going to go along with the lies anymore.
Yeah. I think, I sometimes wonder if something like COVID-19 were to happen again, and, being that there's so many bad experiences that happened, I've tried to war game this in my head. How would people react?
It's the fake alien invasion, man. That's
So I'm curious, and maybe this is something we could try for a future poll, is trying to project into the future. If we had this exact same thing again, right, where we had lockdowns, pathogenically induced lockdowns, how would people react? I'm kind of curious, because we've been there, done that. We've seen this movie before, and we've seen government picking winners or losers, picking the big box stores over the mom and pop stores, right? Mom and pop shops, I should say, and that sort of thing, and the restaurants shutting down restaurants, things like that. And I'm curious as to what people would do, and because would people simply say, "I refuse to participate in the lie"?
Well, that's a big part of a lot of the stuff that I am attempting to get out there, is that if you're looking for somebody to come and save you, you're going to be waiting for forever.
Yeah.
Because they're not. And you need to take responsibility for your life, and you need to figure out ways to where you can team up with other people that are similarly seeing how all of this structure of our society is functioning, and choose to opt out as much as you can, as much as possible, and build those networks, build those systems now, and be proactive, so that you don't have to fall into, whatever coercion or, threat of your job or whatever. Start building that resiliency in your life, so that whatever comes next, that you're prepared.
That's a really good point, Greg. I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of people just were this thing moves so quickly, and so many people were caught unawares. And the people who were, I'm going to say, readiness oriented, if you will, they were not shocked the way others were. And at a bare minimum, for as bad as it was, I hope that a lot of people kind of learned the lesson to, kind of, you talked about, build your network, right? Build your home stores. Build them. You don't have to be perfect, but just a little bit. Just avoid, let's say a 2-week downturn, right? Just avoid that alone makes a huge difference. I hope that it was at least. It doesn't have to be a World War II rationing type of moment, right? I don't want it to be. I don't think anybody wants to be, but I hope it was at least a lesson, or out of the Great Depression, right? That affected people for decades afterwards. I mean, we hear about people's grandparents. They can't even throw away tinfoil, right? Because it was so precious, right? I don't want people to go to that, but I can understand how that changed people's mentality permanently. And I really hope 2020 to 2024 leaves its indelible mark in a healthy fashion.
I do too, because I feel maybe people have been lulled back to sleep a little bit on some of this stuff, and thinking that things are going to get better. But the way things are going with all of this AI technocratic type control structure, I don't think it's going to get better. It's going to continue to be oppressive. So
let's play devil's advocate for just a minute. So I think you and I and many people in the audience are definitely liberty oriented, right? We definitely believe in the concept of individual liberties and rights of the individual. How would Marx and Hegel and Lenin and Stalin and et al., right, respond to all this? Right. Let's just let's play it out for a little bit. And so I'm posing the question to you. It's for both of us and for the entire audience, obviously. How would they respond to these ideas, especially in the last 5 minutes of the video that you just played, which was a really good summary of, the individual liberty is the highest means by which man realizes his highest goals, right? The individual man is his own highest goal, right? And we definitely need that very individualistic nature in society, in order for society to thrive. How would the socialists, communists, collectivists, common goodists, how would they argue against that?
Well, these people are wreckers. They're wrecking our utopia. They're putting a wrench in our operations. So they need to be re-educated so that they fit within our model, so that they become good citizens of our utopian vision. That it would work if they just followed orders, guys. So y'all in your communities, y'all go make sure that you tell on them, on those rule breakers. You go make sure you tell on those rule breakers and get them to shape up or ship out, man, because we need to build our utopia and they're standing in the way.
Yeah. Let me pick up from that very last phrase that you used. They're standing in the way. That's a really good way to phrase that. We have these capitalists, these evil capitalists who are they're hoovering up all the resources. They're taking from the common man for their own consumption and their own pleasures, and their own nihilistic demands and their own traumatized backgrounds. We're the healthy ones, and we just want to make sure everyone gets their fair share. We definitely believe in the North Vietnamese, Uncle Ho Chi Minh's concept of the rice bowl for every man, right? That's all we're trying to do. And it's these greedy, individualists, these greedy capitalists who are getting in our way. And remember, for every dollar that they have, that's a dollar they took from you. You didn't give it to them voluntarily; they took it from you. And for every yacht that they have, that's 1,000 cars that they took from the common man. And we just want to stop all that. We need to get back to an egalitarian, equal footing across the board. And that's if you would just hand us the reins of power, we'll take care of it, and then we will hand back the reins of power to the common man.
Sounds nice, right? Sounds nice. Hey, let's take from these rich bastards that don't care about you, and let's redistribute. We're Robin Hood, man. We're Robin Hood. We're
like Robin Hood.
Yeah. Yeah, man. We're just these guys suck, and nobody likes them, man. So
yeah.
So let's just take their stuff and give it to everybody else. But you have to justify that violence against somebody to take from them to give to somebody else that you have to say that this violence is good because those guys are bad and we have to help all these other people. But the act of having to use force against that person to take their stuff, that's wrong. So
we're not even taking their stuff. We're just redistributing what wasn't theirs in the first place. This isn't violence. This is self-defense. Right?
Yeah, you can come up with any kind of excuse to justify it. And that's where the whole argument with natural law came from our previous live stream.
Yeah.
Is that you have to sit beside the river of truth and not bend when somebody attempts to use some kind of rhetoric or some way of persuasion to get you to do something that would be immoral.
So let's dig into that for just a minute, if you don't mind. I like that. That's a really good way to express that. Would you say sit by the river of truth and not bend? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it comes from Captain America, I think, comic book or whatever. I think
it works.
Plant yourself by the river of truth, and when the world says move, you say no, you move.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great encapsulation. And I will say, so let's dig in a little bit of the psychology of that. Is in many ways that requires there's probably only about 1 to 5% of the world's population that's actually willing to do that. Let's just call it what it is, right? And these are the people who they probably fall into 2 major categories: the people who are just constantly going to say no to everything, right? Then there's the other side: is they really are comfortable with. They're comfortable being uncomfortable, and they're comfortable with being assertive, right? And it doesn't matter if there are 99 people against that person; they are going to say, "No, I'm not moving. Go fuck yourselves," And I think that's we can sit here and theorize all we want, in terms of political theory and philosophy, and obviously, you and I agree with each other, and much of the audience does as well. But there's a certain psychological aspect of it which requires that people just be comfortable with kind of being a little ornery, if you will, right? And just saying, no, I mean, kind of like Captain America at the end of the second movie, when he's asked, I want you to tell me more about that. He says, no, I don't think I will, right? And just very calmly, very, very flatly just said, no, I don't think I will, and I think that's kind of a psychological profile. Some people are born with it, some people it's developed. And I think that's maybe something that people like us, maybe we need to look for that in others.
I've talked to this with Tyler actually about how maybe it is beneficial to be somewhat of an outsider because you have that time to think and ruminate on things, and you're not like constantly in the group think. Like you're set off aside for a little bit to think about how things are really working.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of develop a hardness to you to where you get put in a group dynamic or something like that, and you're more willing to say, no, this isn't right, and I'm not gonna participate with that anymore.
Yeah.
And be willing to be ostracized. And that's a huge fear for so many people. That's why so many people don't want to go and public speak, because it would be better if they died than go speak in public. Because what if these people, don't like what I have to say and they're going to crucify me, So it's like being ostracized from the group is such a deep-seated fear for so many people that they would rather, not do or say anything. They would just rather go along with whatever's going on so that they don't cause any disruptions or waves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think many people have a real fear of being ostracized and being social pariahs.
Yeah.
That is like pretty much right at the top of it borders on phobia, right? And almost like a person caught in a burning building, they will make every bargain necessary to get out of that situation, and I'm very sympathetic to it. I get it. There's just different personality types, and a lot of what you're saying is tying directly in what Tyler's saying, from Emerson's Self-Reliance, whoever would be a man must be a nonconformist, right? And I think it's really well said, Tyler. I appreciate you bringing that up. It's almost like man and nonconformist. It's like that is a necessary condition, a necessary ingredient, if you will.
Yeah. And that's really, whatever that famous phrase is that, weak men create hard times, strong men create good times, and then that leads to weakness again, and then the cycle all continues. So let's take a comedy break. You brought us the call, and then I'll raise you one. So let's dive into that. I got it pulled up here.
I forgot what I sent.
I think it was Instagram.
Yeah.
Is it this guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's unmute this. And you got a premise for this one?
So my buddy sent this to me, and we served together. So all day long we're just breaking each other's balls, and of course they had to send this to me because I'm half Chinese. So.
All right.
So what I like is the title is Lobster Roll. If you look at the ingredients, they actually got the spelling correct, so they call it lobster.
Lobster rolls. That's pretty good. I like it. All right.
We're constantly just sending each other offensive. Like there's like 5 of us in this group. We're constantly sending each other offensive, videos.
Nice.
So.
All right. So my raise comes from my buddy's new channel here. Then he's been creating some little songs with AI, and this is one of them that he just put together. This is a banger. There we go. Hold on, let me share the screen here.
Wake up, sheeple, open your eyes. Chemtrails raining down from the sky. Poison in the food, poison in the streams. Turning frogs fabulous, living the dream. They say it's progress, but it's all applied. Messing with your water whether you like it or not. The truth ain't pretty, but I'll shout it loud. The government's here and they're real proud. Spank me, Big Daddy government. Oh, I'm in trouble, can't pay the rent. Smile while you tighten that grip on me. I'm your favorite conspiracy. Trump's on the mic saying I'm the greatest, the best there is, no one can debate this. Meanwhile, they're spraying the sky all day. Add a little extra to your Milky Way. Don't drink the water, don't trust the bread. Who knows what they're pumping in your head? From City Hall to the farmer's gate, they're watching you while they marinate. Spank me, Big Daddy government. Oh, I'm in trouble, can't pay the rent. Smile while you tighten that grip on me. I'm your favorite conspiracy.
All right. Yeah, so he's coming up with some little truth bangers there with the music. And
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you for reminding me about something. I mentioned the last time I was having some migraines sometimes, and you mentioned making sure that we get enough magnesium, right? We probably don't get enough.
Yeah.
And you mentioned magnesium, what was it, glycinate?
Yeah, magnesium glycinate, and then magnesium chloride they make into an oil that you can apply topically.
Okay, so I looked online, I was looking around, this is like several months ago. I was looking for, do you know Element, LMNT? It's a mineral, replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously probably effective, but obviously you pay an arm and a leg for it because it's all prepackaged. They have the right amount that you need for X amount of water, etc. So I started looking around, and you go through university YouTube, you find plenty of great resources. So I found one, and I actually forgot that if I can see it, magnesium malate is something that people had recommended. So I forgot I was actually taking it. So I appreciate you reminding me that this is in my mix. And I think I have six ingredients. There's like 2 more than regular, and some salt, I think. And when you break it down on a per dose or per serving basis, it comes out to like 68 cents. So if you're willing to buy in bulk and just do the calculations yourself and mix it up, you can get really, really cheap. So I recommend it. People do that. I get a magnesium malate, which is this right here, salt, which is really cheap. I use what's it called? Red and real salt, potassium aspartate, essential amino acids, branched chain amino acids, and calcium citrate. And then you can get some flavorings, which are basically just like there's true orange, true lemon, true lime, which are basically just citric acids, solid powdered citric acids. You can add in there if you want some flavor. And some people even add like monk fruit or allulose for a little sweetener. I try to avoid that. But anyway, instead of doing Element, you can just buy the stuff in bulk and then just do your own.
Nice. Yeah. It's super important to get the magnesium, and your body burns magnesium in response to stress, from what I understand. So I think a majority of people are deficient in it, and migraines is one of the signs of it. So
yeah, makes sense.
Super, super important trace mineral. We would get it from our food, but they use the NPK fertilizers, and it's pretty much just like all that gets taken up from the plant, and there's really not a way for that plant to pull the trace minerals from the soil because it's got everything it needs. It does. It's a lazy plant.
Yeah. So here's a quick side subject on that, because I think you're bringing up a really good topic. maybe we can talk about this in a future episode. So if anyone's interested in a great book, I really enjoyed, very informative, and has a really good reframing of some so-called environmental issues. The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre Keith. Lierre, like Pierre, but Lierre with an L. The Vegetarian Myth, I think is what it's called. Really well written. And she shows that vegetarianism, veganism is bad for the planet, bad for our health, bad for the economy, bad for our politics, bad for our economies, and bad for our, I'll say, natural water supplies, if you will. And she talks about the idea, and you really did a great job of touching on this, Greg, of basically, feeding all of these so-called fertilizers into the soil, and we've stripped away so many of the essential nutrients and minerals out of our soil, starting from basically about the Great Depression, where now the soil is just a growing medium. It's not a source of minerals, and compare and contrast that with what North America was like when the Pilgrims got here, and we had bison, that were herds were hundreds of thousands head strong, and the topsoil in some places I think was deep as 10, 11, 12 feet, which had built up over hundreds of thousands of years. And because it was such a really nutrient dense mixture of natural fertilizer, right, which was bison dung and bison urine, and then you add to that their hooves stepping on the ground, creating these micro ecologies, if you will, right? And you ask any cattleman, like we know John, right, our local cattleman here, and he taught us about this whole idea of micro ecologies just from the hooves. And and Lierre brings up a great point that we have to import so many petrochemicals, right, crude oil, from the Middle East. So we're funding much of the Middle East when we don't want to, in order to get to crack that into gasoline, diesel, and then fertilizer products, right? So we're literally dumping petrochemicals into our soil because we're doing so much monocropping, and we're damaging so much of this. And so I realize a little bit of a tangent here, but I think you brought up a really good point. I just kind of wanted to fill in some more depth, get back up what you're saying.
Yeah, we could really dive into that on a future live stream, because it is really important. Do you have? Am I hearing like the feds in my ear or something, or do you got like?
I've got my
monitoring the radio. Over there.
I am. I forgot to turn that. It's my VHF UHF. It's my ham radio. Sorry.
Are we getting?
I didn't realize the microphone was that sensitive.
Are we getting the spooks monitoring us on the?
Shut it down. They're getting to the truth. They're getting too close.
Shut it down. Shut it down. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's cool. I was just hearing it in the background. I'm like, what's going on here?
It's on all the time, and I just shut it off, and I just didn't think about it.
All right. Well, let's see. I've got.
So in terms of so we talked about the common good, right? And I really like how you brought this up and framed it. So should we? So the video talks more about like just some of the fundamentals of the individual, right? Is at the most atomic, right? Let's project a little bit more into that, because I think this is so important, because it's easy for anyone just to come along and say, just to say, oh, well, you just need to respect individual rights, and that's it, right? You just go with that. But we have to sell it. So how do we sell this, right? How do we sell the other side of this?
The individual versus the collective mentality.
Yeah, let's just go with that. That's fine. So, or as Ayn Rand would say, individualism versus tribalism.
Okay, so from my recent interview with Alan, he put it in a really good way when it comes to systems thinking. So when you think of a large, complex system that is operating under, say your car, okay? So let's say your car, and it has all this electronics and stuff, and it's got its ECM, it's got its electronic control module in the car that's reading the tire sensors. It's operating the fuel injection system. It's being able to provide the right voltage to your LCD display, and all these things are going on. And this little centralized little computer thing has to function for the entire system to be able to operate. If that little computer chip goes down in some way, it causes a catastrophic failure for the whole system.
Yeah.
So the same thing with our human society is that if you had all these little, instead of that one central thing being able to operate all those components, and that thing going down, that the whole thing fails. If you have a more simple design where you have mechanical components in the system, and there's no little central little computer that can fail, you could slap something together, maybe with just some simple tools to get that thing running again, instead of it being a complete catastrophic failure that puts the system down entirely. That there is a way to have some redundancy there and some anti-fragility in that thing. And thus the individual in society is able to be more adaptive to the changes in the changes in the local area, make decisions a lot faster than decisions that would be implemented from a collective mentality. So it's that boots on the ground kind of thing. And I guess that's the best way that I could lay it out for somebody in more of a simple way. Like if you were going to design a system, my background in engineering, we had the term "keep it simple, stupid." Like if you're going to design something for somebody, they're not going to be a technical expert in this thing that you're designing. So you want to make it as simple as possible so that if somebody's picking up that little instruction manual on how to use the thing, that they don't have to have a PhD to figure it out,
Yeah.
So the simplest designs end up actually being the most, that can be the most elegant, actually. And that's a lot of how nature works, is that it's like a self-learning feedback system, right? You were talking about that earlier in regards to AI. It doesn't have this sensory feedback that would help it to adjust its model or its algorithm in order to adapt to some new circumstance or situation. So having the individual make decisions is the fastest way that you can solve the problems that are being faced by the people on the ground in that local area. So I really think we have to really move away from this like centralization, collectivist mentality towards the individual and personal responsibility if we want to see change happen.
I like that. That's a really, really compelling analogy there. If I could add to that, in terms of going that simpler design, which I'm a proponent of, I think that a avoids single point of failure and single mode of failure, right? Or I should say modal failure, right? And then on the other side, it creates more robustness, right? It's anti-fragile, if you will. Right. And that in some ways, an anti-fragile system, when it's stressed in a good way, right? When it has external stressors, what we call external forcing functions, it actually gets better over time, right? And the system is able to adjust, and we see this with biological evolution, right? That would explain the vast diversity of life that we see today, right? Yep. And it's able to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So I think these are emergent properties, right? As far as we know, at least in terms of the theory of evolution, there's no top-down approach. It's all bottom-up, emergent outcomes, emergent properties, if you will. And I appreciate that. I think that was very much a philosophy in some ways of Kalashnikov, right? When he was designing the AK-47, and I'm paraphrasing, he criticized the West for going for these designs, which everything had to be so tight, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And what ended up happening, and we saw it, unfortunately, in Vietnam, where the new M16s, the A1s, were failing spectacularly. These really tight tolerances. And he said, no, let the parts fly, right? And, we can argue about the merits, AK-47 versus M16, fine. But in terms of the idea is make this stuff really robust. I know it's going to get a lot of rounds on the other side, and that's what I need to happen, with high levels of reliability, maybe not such really good levels of accuracy and precision, right?
Yeah. Shooting those different firearms myself, I experienced, in shooting at SKS versus the AR platform.
Yeah.
It's like you can throw whatever crap ammo you have into that SKS and it'll just work.
Right.
It just works. And because of all the tolerant, it's not as tight to tolerances and everything. It'll just feed those rounds. It can be the crappiest steel ammo that you found. It can be rusted to crap, and you may lubricate it a little bit to get it to feed properly or something. But that thing it'll just keep running that ammo. It could be the crappiest ammo around, and it'll just work. Yep. Versus the AR, some of them, you throw the cheap ammo, throw that cheap steel ammo in there, and you'll get a round stuck in there or something. You have to clear the jam. Yeah. And, that could be really bad in a critical moment, Yeah.
We had the M16A2s. I hated that platform. It just sucks. If you didn't have that thing really well oiled, it could freeze up on in a moment's notice. And I'll say in comparison to the M1 Garand, you could run hundreds of rounds with zero lubrication in that thing, and it's cold.
Wow.
So, I can see why so many of the men out of World War II in Korea loved that platform. I heard there are even men who were taking the Garand into Vietnam, because it was just such a dependable platform.
Oh, nice. Yeah. There is something to be said about the simplicity in a design, and you get a lot of more manufacturability, ease of manufacture, all that kind of stuff when systems aren't so complicated.
If I could extend this to another analogy, so I used to be a commodities trader, futures, commodities, stocks, etc. And I was mostly a systems trader, meaning there's a very definitive set of rules for definitive entry and definitive exits for positions. And I remember I really tried to dig into this. And so this was in the late 90s, early 2000s when I got into this. And really trying to understand the various philosophies around system trading, system development, system implementations. And I remember so many of the old timers were like, you need to choose these systems that are very simple, very straightforward. You don't need a PhD to understand them, right? And if you are using statistics, it's like really basic statistics. And don't try to optimize to the nth degree. They actually call it over-optimization, right? Because it ends up becoming narrowed down to a very specific set of circumstances. So it needs to be pretty broad-based in terms of what they call the parameters of your variables in the system. And it needs to be able to survive in a wide variety of different environments, whether it be trending, sideways trending, or choppy markets. And they can, what I consistently heard from these guys is, sure, they may not give you the best results in terms of like right now or even like a couple of years, but these are the systems that are robust enough. They will be able to go through the downturns and outlast these other systems which are so finely tuned, if you will. They kind of work in a gross method, and they just kind of work over and over again. The downside of those is you got to be willing to go through the financial downturn, what they call a drawdown, where you may be down many thousands, tens of thousands of dollars before you get back up to zero. And it's a real bear, emotionally, psychologically, to go through that. And you got to keep doing all those trades. You got to go take all the shitty ones with all the good ones as well. But they consistently stressed the idea of the simpler systems over the long run outperform the more sophisticated and highly tuned ones.
Interesting. Yeah, I played around with trading for a little while and was looking at whatever you got the moving averages of the trades on the candlesticks and reading the candlesticks and everything like that. So it was always more of a make a long-term investment for me and dollar cost average rather than sit and trade, because it gets technical, but if you can be able to read it, you can maybe make some decent predictions on stuff. But you have to sit there and really, really study and figure out everything that's going on.
Yeah, what I noticed was that right around the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this switchover in I'll call it was a phase change, where prior to that point, a lot of these markets, whether it be cattle futures or wheat, or even the S&P 500, and especially the currencies, they could have these nice long trends over long periods of time. And then there was this phase change that happened right around 2000, where a lot of these markets started to become very choppy. And chop doesn't mean sideways. You know, you could have sideways and down move and sideways and up move. And it was just really difficult to get a handle on these things. And so a lot of the systems that worked really well through the 70s, 80s, and 90s were just completely demolished. You know, so you take your typical, there's like 5 basic system categories, if you will. Your trend traders, opening range breakout, counter trend. I think there's like 2 more. I'll think in a minute. Gap trading was a 4th one. I'll think of the 5th one in a minute. So you know, a lot of that stuff just exploded, so this is with the advent of the internet really coming around and being broad based, where more and more players could get in there. And you know, a lot more retail people get in there, creating a lot of chop, and that kind of killed it. So I was like, I'm out. I got my money. I'm done.
Peace. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. So, in terms of selling this idea of individual liberty, individualism versus tribalism. one thing the way I like to present this is when people say, well, now you have to defend your assertion. And from a logical point of view, yes, if I'm asserting it, yes, I have to defend it. But I remember I got into a pretty heated debate with a gentleman about a decade ago about this. And he said, well, you have to defend your position. I said, in a way, I don't. I'm over here minding my own business. And you're coming along and telling me I have to participate in the collective. So no, I don't actually. You're the one who has to defend your position. Other than that, you have to leave me alone. So from a purely logical point of view, yes, he was right. But I'll say from a civics point of view, no, I don't. Because he's come along and he's trying to compel me and others, you must participate in this system. And so for me, it was kind of like, no, I'm not going to participate in your debate. I'm not going to participate in your argument. So we could take that as an attack, if you will, is no, I don't have to, because you're trying to impose on me and you've provided no compelling reason why I ought to do that. And by the way, let's just call this what it is. It's coercion. If I don't participate, you're gonna engage in coercion. And I think most people don't look at it that way. They look at it like, oh, well, you can choose to participate. No, I can't. By definition, I cannot. It's not choice.
Yeah. It really goes back to our discussion on natural law, is that that you have value as an individual and you own yourself, right? So if you don't own yourself, then somebody else does.
Yeah, right.
And can dictate whatever they want to you because you've abdicated your choices over to another entity or another person.
Yeah.
So,
I got into a pretty I'll say heated debate, but it was civil debate with another individual. I think it was actually it's two people. One of them was Margaret, the other one was Carla, and it probably took me like an hour and a half of maneuvering, trying to understand where they're coming from, and finally kind of like getting them back into a philosophical corner. So they both believed that women have the right to abortion. Okay, so let's take that and pin that one. And then Carla said something to the effect of, I don't believe people have rights. So this was several minutes later in the debate and the discussion. She said, I don't think people have rights. And she and Margaret definitely believed in the idea that the collective can demand certain things of the individual. So, okay, that's fine. And so, and there's something kind of clicked. And I said, wait a second. On the one hand, you're telling me that people don't have rights, correct? And she said, yeah. I says, so do you own yourself? Do you have rights to your own body? And she said, no. I said, okay. So then what about your position on abortion? Does a woman have a right to abortion? Does she own herself? Can she do what she wants with her own body? And she said, well, yeah. I said, help me square that circle. Help me understand. On the one side, you're saying yes. The other side, you're saying no. And are these rights that you're talking about, are they transsexual? Are they transgender? Do they apply only to women, or can they apply to men as well? And she to her credit, she kind of grinned nervously and she said, you always ask the hard questions. And she didn't answer the question, but I give her a lot of credit that she didn't try to worm her way out of it. So I will say typically people who have that position that we don't have rights are typically going to be the same people who say abortion is a right. And that's one philosophical corner you can push them into. So for you and for the audience, it's a nice tactic.
Yeah. Kind of getting them to realize that if you don't own yourself, then somebody can dictate whatever they want. If you don't have that fundamental understanding.
Yeah. And I think that's what they were trying to maneuver into was, no, you don't have rights. You don't own yourself. And ergo, someone else can own you, you know? And I think they're in that discussion, this is many years ago. I think I basically reduced it down to, because she was trying to say that like someone else can own, can tell you what to do. I said, okay, so as I go both ways, do I get to tell you what you can do? And then you get to tell me what to do? Essentially, what's the difference there? You know? And
Yeah.
again, that was another, you know, kind of a nervous laugh moment for her.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, I think that's a good note to end on here. And where can people catch what you got going on and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so definitely on meetup.com, look for Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee. We obviously talk about Bitcoin 99% of the time, but on occasion we talk about some other crypto assets out there. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate you putting that up there. And this is our way of being of service to others, because we want people to be able to own their destiny, if you will, to own themselves. And we are definitely proponents of the idea that one of the most important things that people can own as property is money, good money, dependable money, sound money. And we're definitely proponents of the idea that Bitcoin is actually the very first true form of money. For as much as we love what gold has done for us for 5,000 years, the first true form of money, if I could paraphrase Michael Saylor, the first real true form of money had to be engineered. And we all know about Michael Saylor. He's an MIT trained engineer. And we have meetings, they're all online. We try to make it easy for everyone. There are the fourth Wednesday and fourth Saturday. So this coming Saturday, 2 days, we're coming up with our Saturday session, 11 to 1 Central Standard Time. And then the following Wednesday will be the fourth Wednesday of the month. That goes from 6 to 8 Central Standard Time. It's all online. And we love newbies. You know, we love the energy and the questions that newbies bring. Many times they're bringing some new life to the table, which is so important because they're asking the questions that sometimes we just kind of take for granted. And so it's nice that when we get newbies in there, because it really forces us to re-examine the fundamentals. And it could be anything such as, okay, why is Bitcoin so important? What's so compelling about it? How do I get this thing called Bitcoin? What's the easiest way to get it? How long should I hold it? You know, how should I think about it? Is it an investment? You know, and these are just some basic questions. But then we also get into some more technical questions about Bitcoin, how it works under the hood. And then a lot of what we talk about there is really what are the implications of having a true hard money system. And, you know, Bitcoin has, in my humble opinion, has taken the crown from gold. It truly is a global reserve asset. Just the rest of the world just doesn't know it yet. We like to think we're really far ahead of the curve. And we want everyone to be in a point where they are self-sovereign, where they can spit themselves out of the system. They don't have to be subject to the whims and the foibles of a centralized government, of a socialist communist government. And this is FU money without being a billionaire. This is the ability for people to act peer-to-peer, truly atomically with each other across the entire planet. And I think it is really the concept of fix the money, fix the world. So many of the problems that we see in our country and pretty much every country around the world stems from the fact that we have fiat money standards, fiat currency. These are soft money standards where the government can just print money ad infinitum, ad nauseum, and they're stealing value directly out of your wallet. So we want to help people become more independent and really understand the philosophy of good money.
Excellent. And y'all go check out the Bitcoin Meetup and it's a really good way to get educated on cryptocurrencies and everything. Go check out Jay and participate in the meetup if you're around. It's online, so you can join from anywhere. And
you can come in your jammies if you want to. That's fine.
Show up in your jammies. So, and then if you guys like our conversations here, we're doing these every other Thursday on the channel. So subscribe, hit that like, leave us a comment about maybe some topics that you might like us to discuss in the future, and share the show with your other friends on social media that could get if you got value out of this, and really appreciate that. Help grow the channel. So, Jay, thank you so much, man, and everybody, we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thank you, brother. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, peace.